Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the Potter Podcast. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to those of you that are watching live. And I think this is going to be a good one today, especially because it is something that is so, I think, common, especially now in this market. And we all know what kind of market we're in right now. I've got buyers and sellers reaching out to me constantly, asking questions and wanting to know what exactly is happening and going on a daily basis. And that's what it is, guys. It is literally a daily basis of just constant change and just constant chaos is what I'd like to call it. Offers that are being offered are sometimes just outrageous in my opinion, but I'm like, hey, this is the market and this is what we're in and it is what it is. And so that is why I wanted to talk to you guys about my topic today. And I think it's something that we're all aware of, but maybe not really thinking much of, if that makes sense. So I want to kind of break this down with you. I was actually having this conversation with one of my buddies and friends and persons that I do business with and refer business to. And we were talking about this market, and we were talking about just how crazy things are, and talking about his business and how it's affecting his business, and also how it's affecting ours, and we were brainstorming, just kind of sharing some of these things, and then we actually started having a conversation about this topic, and it was interesting because as we started talking, if you know anything about the market right now, there is way more demand out there than there are supplies on the market. In other words, there's a lot of buyers out in the market and there's a lot of low inventory. So there's not enough houses on the market currently to basically meet the needs of all the buyers that are out there. But as we started talking about this, we started saying, well, is everyone out there a buyer, right? And so is everyone out there that says that they're a buyer in this market, are they actually a ready, willing, and able buyer to go purchase a home? And I think that's a really good question to ask, because I think there's a lot of people that think they're a buyer that is out there in the market, but they're not really capable of purchasing a home yet. They might be going through the process. They might think that they can purchase a home, and then they start going through the pre-approval process with the lender, and then they realize their debt-to-income ratio or some other things need to come down, their credit score needs to come up, different things like that, that might set them back like 3, 6, 9 months before they can actually go out and purchase a home. But sometimes people get, like we say, the cart before the horse. And what I mean by that is I think some people get really excited about a potential property that hits the market, and then they start shooting that picture of that house or whatever to their agent, and they say, hey, we want to go look at this. I think we might want to write an offer, but they haven't even started the pre-approval process, right? And so as they start going through that, some agents actually go and show that house, and then they want to write up, and they end up writing up an offer. And now you find yourself in a situation that isn't necessarily always good, right? Like you find yourself in a situation where you're crossing your fingers or you're hoping that these clients will get pre-approved and that they'll be able to move forward on this house after they've written up on it and they've got the house, and sellers are happy, buyers are happy, and then something happens where things start falling apart. And then nobody's happy, right? The agents aren't happy. The seller definitely isn't happy because they thought they sold their house and now they've got to put it back up on the market. And the buyers aren't happy because they were all excited that they thought they were getting this house and now they find out that they can't afford it. And so I really want to maybe challenge some of you guys that are out there that may be thinking about purchasing a house, but also if you're a seller, to be aware of the type of buyers that are actually out there as well. So this is, again, while it's important to have an experienced, knowledgeable agent representing you through this time. And honestly, if you're for sale by owner, or you're thinking about going for sale by owner, this would scare the crap out of me. And this is why I would want an agent representing me while I'm selling my house, not only for the sole fact that that agent's going to net you more money despite paying out a commission. Statistically, it shows us that for sale by owners end up paying less or earning less money when they sell their house rather than use an agent. And in this market, I would be highly recommending using an agent because they're going to use the MLS, their marketing, their advertising, their skills to get in as many people into that house as possible, which in turn is going to give you potentially multiple offers in this market, and you are going to be netting way more money than you would have if you were have listed the house yourself, just because you've got somebody that's representing you through the process that knows what's happening, knows how to market your property, knows how to price your property in this market, and knows what to expect. And so I think that's very key as you're thinking about that. But even more importantly, even past all that stuff, right? Like I tell people this all the time, like anybody can sell a house, anybody can write a contract, right? But it's the process throughout the transaction that provides value for that real estate agent and their client. And even afterwards, right? Like even after the sale of the home, I can't tell you how many times I'm working with my past clients or I'm working with future clients, helping them get their house ready or helping them make updates or adjustments to their homes by referring them people in my trusted network. And so there is a benefit of using an agent. And if you have a good agent, they will definitely provide value to you as you're moving forward. But let me back up and get back into the conversation for today. I got kind of sidetracked, my bad. But as we're talking about this market, again, as a seller, you would want to know, and this is where you're going to have the ability to have an agent represent you that gives you this expertise and this knowledge. But it's also nice to know, like, if you're working with another agent and a buyer that's coming in, to have that agent be able to tell you if this is a reliable, trustworthy, smooth transaction type of person that they're going to be working with by accepting their offer. And that's something you won't get because you will have no clue who these agents are that are writing up on your house. And sometimes you'll have a new agent, sometimes you'll have an agent that has absolutely no clue what they are doing. And then you are stuck going through a horrible transaction. Some of you listening have probably been in that situation, and I apologize for that, but hopefully you've learned from your mistakes. And so I think that's a key in this market as you're thinking about some of these things. And as buyers to know, like, listen, you can only you don't deserve something that you can't afford. Okay, like, and let me break that down for you. This happens so many times in our industry, and I've been hearing story after story from lenders and other agents. And this is what happens: somebody gets pre-approved for a specific amount, and then they think they can go over that amount, right? Like they think that, like, okay, I got pre-approved for 200, but like I should be okay if our offer gets accepted at 220. Well, not necessarily. Like if your lender said that 220 is kind of your max, or 200 is kind of your max, and you went up to 220, that could cause some problems. Again, that's why it's important to have somebody that's experienced that can walk you through this and educate you through this process, and also why it's important to have a good lender, right, to explain these things to you. So some people in this market get super excited about a house that they really, really want, and they're like, oh, we can afford to go $25,000, $30,000 more. That's great. You may think that you can afford that, but the bank may say differently, and the bank may say, no, actually, we're not going to give you that loan. And now you find yourself in this awkward moment, right? And so you need to understand what it is that you can afford. You also need to understand that it is important for you to know what you deserve. And what I mean by that is you don't deserve anything if you can't afford it, okay? Here's the deal. I always ask people, I'm like, listen, I know that you've been pre-approved for this amount, but at the end of the day, where are you comfortable making a payment, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't want you to be excited to move into a house and then feel strapped because now you paid way more than what you should have for the house and you can't go out with friends to have a dinner or you can't go travel, or you can't do any of these other things because now you are attached to that mortgage payment and making that payment, and that's like the max. Here is a good piece of advice that I think you guys should know. And many people say this, but because I'm going to give a shout out here, Dave Ramsey, and I'm a Dave Ramsey trusted partner with him. And what I mean by that is if you are a Dave Ramsey fanatic like we are, and you like to save money and get out of debt and save for the future and invest and do all those other things, I think he has a very wise strategy when it comes to some of this stuff. And some other people will tell you this too, but your mortgage payment shouldn't be more than 50% of your income. Okay, think about that for a minute. When you are thinking about going to purchase a house, right, find out and you know what you're making on a monthly basis, not spending more than 50%. If you want to be really careful, I would almost say trying to stick around that 35 to 40%. Okay, like that, I don't think I would want to go over any of those numbers just because I don't want to be stretched, right? But I think you're still safe if you're in that area because that allows for 50% of the rest of your income to go towards other stuff like groceries and going to have some entertainment with you and your spouse or you and yourself and your friends or whoever that is. But now you won't feel as strapped, right? The problem that people I think get into sometimes is that they end up strapping themselves and they'll go well over that 50%. And they will get crazy when it comes to wanting to get that house, right? Like they are so fixated on wanting to get that house. But the reality is, and the truth is, and your agent may not tell you this, but I will, is that you are only able to purchase what you are able to purchase, okay? You don't deserve to get a certain house for a specific amount if you can't afford it. Okay, that's the reality. That's the truth. If you don't have an agent that's telling you that, find yourself a new agent, okay? Because you need to have someone that's going to shoot the breeze with you and that is going to be your friend, but also, more importantly, is going to be upright with you and truthful and is going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, right? Because they're looking out for your best interest. If they're a good agent, that's their job. They want to look out for your best interest, put you in a position where you're going to win, where you're going to be comfortable, and where you're going to have a happy life moving forward, right? Okay, so I think it's important too, like when you're thinking about some of these things, we all, and I think we're all in this boat, right, including myself, is there are times where I find myself dreaming about what that dream home looks like, right? And it's got to have this, and it's got to have this, and it's got to and this list gets longer and longer and longer. And I think sometimes we get so far ahead of ourselves where we make this unrealistic list, right? Like we make this list of, hey, here's a bunch of things that I have to have. But when you look at the reality and what these homes are selling for in your market, the reality is you may not be able to afford some of those houses and with all those must-haves. Okay, that's just the truth. And if you don't have an agent that's going to tell you that, again, get yourself a new agent. Because it sets you up for this unrealistic, hopeful situation where it's like, oh, we can afford this, we can do this. And the reality is you can't. I mean, you might be able to get into the home, but again, you're going to be in a strapped position where you're not going to be able to afford to do other things. And then you're going to kind of regret that situation. And so that was kind of how this conversation was going with us, is that you've got a ton of buyers that are out here in this market that think they deserve some of these houses and these higher price ranges and different things. And it's like, man, they don't deserve that because they can't afford it, right? Like, and it's a hard reality, right? But if you think about it, think about your city for a minute. Think about the different areas of your city. Is everything in the same price range? No, everything's not in the same price range. Is there more luxurious housing in certain areas of the city? Absolutely. Is there more of a, I would say, first-time home buyer area of the city? Yeah, I would think so. That you know where those pockets and those areas are at. Are there parts of the city that are like your move up sort of houses, like we like to call them, right? Like your family's expanding, you're now growing out of this first time home buyer house that you purchased, and your family's expanding and you need to get into a bigger house, right? But like it's not a luxurious house, but it's maybe got some more bedrooms, some more baths, a finished basement, those types of things. Like you know where those areas of town are at, right? And so again, hopefully, you know, as you move forward in life, right, the goal is to always especially financially, right? Like financially, we always want to be moving forward, right? But sometimes there's setbacks, right? Sometimes jobs get lost, you get laid off, you maybe not, you switch jobs, right? And so there's certain things that happen throughout life, but as you continue to like move forward, hopefully you start seeing that income move forward, right? Like as you start paying off some debt, as you start saving some more money, as you start investing some of that money and seeing a return on it, you start seeing yourself 10, 15, 20 years later with the ability to have more money. And if you've purchased a house, 10, 15, 20 years later, now you've got all this equity, in your house that when you go to sell, you can now use as a down payment for the purchase of the new house, which allows you to move up a little bit, right? But somehow, some way, I think a lot of first-time home buyers get this idea in their head that they deserve a certain type of house, and it's a house that they can't afford. And then they find themselves in this house regretting making the purchase, regretting being in that situation, and sometimes, sadly, having to sell the home because they can't afford it. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? That's what we're trying to educate you and inform you on, as far as knowing what it is that you can afford, knowing what it is that you are looking for. And although this may be your first house, there might have to be some sacrifice there. There might have to be, okay, you know what, like we thought we really wanted this, but at the end of the day, we can get into this house and it doesn't have that. Are we okay with that? Right? And those are sometimes some of the conversations that you need to be having, especially in this market, because when things are going for 25, 30, 40,000, sometimes 50,000 over the asking price, and you're waiving all contingencies, in most cases, as you're walking through some of those houses, that there's going to be updates that need to be made. Some appliances are going to need to be upgraded. Maybe the HVAC system is going to need to be updated. The roof is maybe got like 5 years left, so you're going to have to replace that sometime down the road. You start thinking about some of these other things that are going to add up on top of what you just paid going over the asking price. And so you have to ask yourself the question, what is it that we're willing to sacrifice? If it's your first home, even if it's your second home, it doesn't always have to mean that you have to go out and spend a ton of money to get exactly everything that you want, right? Like it just doesn't work that way. Like when you look at our parents' generation, and you look at how long our parents worked and how long they, if you go back and you look at photos and you see pictures of yourself like as a child growing up, there's a lot of cases. I'm not saying that this is every case, but I would say majority of cases, if we all went back and we looked at photos and we went over and had a conversation with our parents and we asked them, how many houses did we live in as we were growing up, right? A lot of them probably wouldn't say like, well, this was the only one. Now there are some, right? Especially if you're like one of the youngest ones of 4 or 5 kids, like there are some. But if you were that first or second child, I'm going to say, I would put money down saying that your parents probably were in 2 or 3, sometimes 4 plus houses before they ended up being in the house that they're in now, that is probably a forever home, or at least a home that they foresee themselves being in for a period of time before they retire and go somewhere else. I would say that that's probably the reality, right? But I think we fail to see that progress as it took place, like with our parents, and into the generation that we're into now. Like it's just like we want everything that our parents have, and it's like, wait, hold on, you're 20 some 30 some years old, your parents are 50 60 years old, they've got 30 years of hard work, of investment, of different things in front of you that should allow you to understand that, like, okay, it may take time for us to get there, but eventually we'll get there if we set out a plan and have goals and things like that. And that's another thing that I want to say is your agent should bring value to more things other than just real estate, right? Like, I love having the conversation with my clients about like their finances and where they're at and where they're headed, and if they need any help getting to where they want to go, right? Like, if I sit down and I have conversations with clients and they're like, you know, we thank you so much for being able to help us through this purchase, but we want to use you in the future, not only for helping us when we go to sell this house again, but possibly investing in some real estate, possibly helping us understand what it means to get life insurance and what it means to go invest in some of these other things. Like, those are the types of conversations too that an agent should have a little bit of knowledge in. And if they don't have that knowledge, they at least have a connection to refer you to, right? Like, I'm referring people all the time to like my financial advisors and my people, especially in like life insurance and different things like that I think are important as well, as you get into some of these next stages of life. And I think that you know, when I look back, it's just like, man, I wish I would have had those connections earlier, because it would have helped us get ahead further, faster. And so that's something that we love to offer our clients. But again, something to think about as you're going forward and you're buying these different houses is that when you get into this first house, it doesn't have to be the dream home, right? It doesn't have to be like everything that hit the want list. But think about the things that, like, what do we need right now? What do we need that will carry us through the next 3, 4, 5 years? And then when we get to that point where our family expands, or maybe it's time to take that money that's been built in with equity and appreciation and all that stuff, and maybe we do upgrade to a little nicer, or we build, or something like that. But I would encourage you to make a list, and I would encourage you to make a list of what are the things that we need and what are the things that would be like a bonus / want that we would be willing to sacrifice and give up, knowing that we don't necessarily need those things, right? Like, one of the things that came to mind is, you know, as I was talking with my friend and my buddy, was that, you know, as we were thinking about different things as far as what we could do to help meet the needs of some of these first-time home buyers in this current market, and you obviously think about, okay, what are some other options other than what's available on the table? And as we were brainstorming, you know, like there's some builders that will build some of these houses that they can potentially get into. And it's funny how, like, some people will go through these houses and they'll be like, well, this one doesn't have a dining room, like a formal dining room. And you're just like, okay, well, like, that's okay, because this is what you can afford right now. Like, if you've got a place where you can meet and have a little small table there in the kitchen, but not necessarily like a formal dining room, at least you still have a place to eat, right? Like, you still have and in most cases, when you think about like a formal dining room, how often does that really get used, right? Unless it's there, that's with the existing house that was set aside for that. Most people tend to forget about that after they get into that home, because they just set up a small table there in the kitchen and they make it work, right? Now, that's not long-term, hopefully, right? But that's something that, like, allowed them to get into something, start making some money, and they're not paying some landlord, and now they're putting money back in their own pocket and they're starting to build equity, right? So, like, there's things that you have to think about, right? Like, some people are like, well, we would need a finished basement. Well, what do you need a finished basement for? It's just you and your wife. Like, you don't have kids yet. Do you need a finished basement? Like, do you need a finished basement right now? Like, you probably don't need one. You would want one, right? But, like, can you afford that type of house right now? So those are the kind of conversations that you need to start having. Like, when Vanessa and I first moved into our house, our first home, like, we didn't have a finished basement. You know, we used it for storage, and we used it for, you know, as we then started having kids, like, they would go down there and they would play and that type of stuff. And then we got to the point where we were like, hey, we probably need some more finished space. And so that was where we realized that, okay, our family's growing, it's time to move, and we need to go find something that has a finished basement for them to like play in and do that type of thing. A little bit more space, right? Like that happens as your family grows. But those are things that you need to think about as you're going through this home buying process. And I can tell you this, I think there is a lot more, or I should say a lot less willing and able and capable buyers that are ready to purchase a home out here in this market. I think there's a lot of buyers that think they're buyers, that think they can afford certain things that really probably shouldn't be out in the market yet. They probably should be saving some more money to put down. They probably should be saving some more money to put away for emergency savings so that when they do move into the house and things break down or things need to get replaced, that they have that money and they're not throwing it on a credit card and going into more debt. Like, I think there's a lot more people that probably are not in a position that they should be buying a house. And just because they got the pre-approval letter makes them think that they are capable and able to purchase a house, but they're not thinking about the ramifications that come down the line when something happens like a roof leaks or the HVAC goes out or something like that, and now they find themselves in a position to have to replace those things and they don't have the money to do it. And I think that's a sad situation when you think about the people that are out there, because it's definitely not the type of experience that we want for any of our clients when they're going through and purchasing a home. We want them to be excited. We want them to sit there and be happy that they got into the home that they got into, and definitely be there for a period of time where they're not regretting that decision, right? And so I think my advice for you guys, especially for buyers, okay, here's my advice for you right now, is to make a list and think about what are the things that we need, and then what are the things that we may want but we're willing to sacrifice if that isn't something in our price range that we're comfortable staying in. Okay, that's important. The next thing that I would say is sellers. Here's where I think it's important for you to know that as you have people writing up on your house, it's great to get 15, 20, 25 offers, whatever the case is, right? But you need to make sure that your agent is vetting these other people and they're looking into these buyers that are writing up on your house and making sure that they have the money available to purchase the home and that they're not going to be very tight, because if something comes up throughout that transaction, outside of them losing their job, obviously, but if something were to come up through that transaction that maybe their debt to income ratio went up because they went and opened up another credit card or whatever the case is to make ends meet, that's probably not the person that you want purchasing your home, because there's a high percentage that deal may fall through due to financing. And so I think that's important to know as a seller, to make sure that your agent is looking into this. Like I will give you an example of one of the recent stories here with our team. And one of my agents went and wrote up on a $300,000 house. Okay, he's got clients. He went and wrote up on a $300,000 house, and there were 25 offers on the property. And there were 3 agents that had kind of the same offer on the table. And they went back to him and they said, hey, for $353 and waive all contingencies, the house is yours. And he went back to his buyers. His buyers were like, we really want the house. We would love to do this. Yeah, let's do it. And so they went back. But one of the things that I think was so smart from that agent on the listing side is she said, hey, before we sign any paperwork, I need to know that your buyers have a proof of funds, basically to see that if the appraisal comes back below that, which it's probably going to, do they have the funds available to pay that difference at closing? And so they literally had to show that they had a proof of funds of $50,000 plus in the bank, knowing that, hey, if that appraisal comes back below and they have to make up that difference, that money's there for them to do when they go to close. Very wise on that listing agent, seller's agent right there, asking for that type of, that's what I'm talking about, is when you want an experienced, knowledgeable agent that is looking out for your best interests in that situation. Like, was it an inconvenience for the buyers? Maybe it was. Like, they had to go an extra step and go get that from their bank or wherever to show that they had those funds. But it's very wise from that agent, because if I'm that agent that's listing that house and I had the buyer's agent say, yeah, they're just not willing to do that, well, I'm not going to go with your offer then, probably, because that means that they don't have the funds there, right? So again, I think it's just important on both sides to know in this market things that you can be doing and preparing for as you're going through some of these things. So with that being said, guys, I really appreciate the time. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to doing the next one with you guys. So have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.